Hello and welcome to MySecurityTV. My name is Chris Cubbage. I'm with MySecurity Media, and this is our Tech and Sec Weekly, our Tuesday afternoon episode. And given it's the end of March, we're going to do a Q1 2021 market update. We're going to be joined by Jeff Park, ANZ Country Manager with Seagate, and we have done some sessions with Jeff talking about video surveillance in the video surveillance sector and also video analytics. So looking forward to speaking to Jeff. And then we've also got a special guest from Singapore, Abhijit Shanbhag. He's the founder and CEO of Greymatics, and we're talking about video analytics, very interesting applications in schools. And I thought here in Australia might be somewhat controversial, but also spark some interest into the power of video analytics. So that's part one for today. And from the audience, please press like or let us know that you're listening from wherever you are in the world, and also what your market update for Q1 might have been for the video surveillance and also the space sector. After we've talked about video surveillance, we're going to be talking with Chris Flaherty, Dr Chris Flaherty. He's with MySpace Warfare Analysis Lab, and he's been writing for our Space and Defence .io channel and a number of articles that he's written. And likewise, we're going to look at the space sector on how it's fared for Q1 of 2021. There's so much been going on, so we're going to be struggling to keep this on the hour, but we will do our best. And obviously, in terms of those trends, we look at the sort of the second half as we move through 2021 on what we're faced with. We cover on aerospace and space, defence and national security, cybersecurity and critical technology, and cities and infrastructure. We should be streaming on YouTube, LinkedIn, and we have about 4 Facebook channels as well, but the main one is the Asia Pacific Security Magazine. And sometimes we release, particularly on cybersecurity, we'll release that out as a podcast. Just as an update of what we've been doing, from Friday, we spoke to Anna LaBelle and Claire Pales on their Secure Board book launch. Now, I can't believe we've still got 3 editions to give away. So if you go to the My Security Marketplace, find our bookstore. Maybe I'm making it too hard. There's 2 author quotes there. So if you want a free book, and it's particularly on the Secure Board, go tell us who those 2 authors are. Send them in, fire them through. Don't put it on the chat because then everyone will know. But even if you want a free book, just let me know. Let me know that you're even listening. And I'll get a copy out to you as well. But otherwise, it's a very interesting conversation about the boards and board of directors and that cybersecurity risk. And obviously, the hot news here in Australia, Channel 9 got taken off air on Sunday from a cyber attack. And then also last week, we looked at the Resilient Multi-Mission Space Program with the Intelligence Surveillance and Space Division of the Defence Science and Technology Group. So this is a nice segue into the space sector as well. And we also looked at drone detection and the integration on their compliance risk management platform with Jonathan King and Lee Croft from AVCRM and Department 13. Now, we're going to break for Easter, so have a great Easter break as of this Friday, but we'll be back next Tuesday afternoon. We're going to stick to that space theme, and a special launch program has been approved. Southern Launch has got their space launch approval for the Kuniba test range in South Australia. And we spoke to Lloyd back in December last year, so it's great to have a catch up with Lloyd, and we'll talk about what their roadmap is looking like for 2021. It's not actually a roadmap, it's more of a sky map on how they will be launching into space. And then also next Tuesday, we're going to start a series. I've got at least half a dozen, I believe, interviews lined up with Israeli defence and technology companies. And the first one is the Zava long-range ISR system. This will see through walls, I think at least 100 metres away. So we'll be speaking to the founder and CEO of Camero Tech, Amir Berry. So looking forward to that. Our Women in Security ASEAN region is kicking along. We have well over 30 registrations now. So if you know women in security in the ASEAN region, the 10 nations of Southeast Asia, please encourage them to get involved. We've also just dropped from New York University, the Tandon School of Engineering, with Professor Dr. Nasir Merman, yes, got that right, looking at deep fakes and seeing is believing. Very interesting. And thanks again to Jane Lowe, our Singapore correspondent. Please grab your copy of the Cyber Risk Leaders magazine. We're starting to do our author promotions now, and also our sponsor RSA and their Secure ID suite. We're also continuing to be sponsored by ALC, their cybersecurity certification courses. We are also starting next week with Daniel Ehrenreich, the SCADA and ICS cybersecurity course. There's still some seats available there, so please check that out. And then I'm wearing my Panda Bear t-shirt today on our Cyber War series, and might be an interesting one. Channel 9 might want to get a series t-shirts on that as well. So that's it from the marketplace, and technically not from the that's it, because we're going to be talking about the market in general with Jeff Park, ANZ Country Manager with Seagate. Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Chris. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. And yeah, it's a bit of a new thing that we're doing, obviously, with the market. We're at end of Q1 at March here in an interesting year so far. So we thought we'd do a quarter update. What have you seen sort of so far? How is it looking? And obviously we'll talk about the Australian New Zealand market, and if anyone else sort of has some insights from the Asia Pacific, yeah, welcome to fire that in. But Jeff, sort of what's the year sort of started off for you and with your customers and stakeholders?
Sure, Chris. I think in the beginning of the year is always a good year for the industry to get together and share, their plans for the year, but also trying to really plan the resources that we have to address the market requirements. And as we come out of more of the restrictions, I had the pleasure of meeting a lot of other ecosystem vendor partners here in Australia, a lot of VMS partners, a lot of SI system wholesale distributors that are related to security. And one thing is very common among all these vendor partners and wholesale SI system integrators. They are really seeing a very, very steady demand coming from the market for the security and CCTV surveillance. I think there was some business impact because the integrator couldn't go out to the customer side, and there was some uncertainties about the budget rollout. But I think everybody is investing more, and I think one thing we're facing as a hurdle as an industry is long lead time from the semiconductor shortage.
Yep.
Other than that, I'm hearing very common. They are deploying more resources. They're setting up new test facilities, design centers. They're running more courses to educate their partners. I think through the COVID last year, and we're still learning, there are so many applications that the NVRs can onboard to utilize the existing infrastructures they have invested.
Well, what we did see this quarter is the sort of the vendors, the VMS sector, trying to get closer to the customer as well. And it's obviously almost does make it difficult, obviously, during COVID and there's lockdowns. They've opened up experience centers. So we actually visited Milestone Experience Center virtually, though. That was one thing. But also Axis released some news that they're reinventing the Oceania region as well. So they're breaking down how they view their particular market. So that's Axis Communications. And Hills and Milestone also released some news that they're signing a new sort of partnership and distribution agreement as well. So there has been some sort of movements there, both from the market, from the camera side, but also from the VMS side on that distribution. Any other movements like that you saw elsewhere as well?
I think so. That's more of a global size movement, that recognizing the market trend here in Australia and New Zealand, where I think the market really see this as an investment, not a cost of doing business. We talked about this before. So definitely it's good to see these global partners investing more in the Australian market. When I speak to more of a local companies who provide actual service to the end users, I think there has been some changes how they also bring the solutions in. So only a few years ago, we had this challenges of overseas solution coming in as an out-of-box solution, and it was very hard for integrators to put it into their customers because it wasn't really addressing the local requirement in terms of camera resolutions or the storage requirement. It wasn't ready for the built-in the AI features. But I think things has changed. So through many of the courses and trainings and knowledge built, I see more of integrators offering blocks of solutions for integrators to go out and really provide a customized solution that works better for the Australian customers. I think that's a really positive move. It also puts a lot of control to the Australian service providers, but ultimately the end users get what they need rather than the solution made it from overseas.
Fair enough too. So look, what we'll do, we also had one of the other highlights I had, it's not so much a market update, but brought the market to the headlines was the Vicada, or Vicada, whichever one you want to say, is the security breach. Hackers accessed the Vicada sort of security network. 150,000 cameras were hacked into. What again does that sort of indicate back to the market, that these are IoT devices and cybersecurity? And it's again something else. We cover cyber very strong. A lot of the VMS and the camera manufacturers are talking to us about saying, well, we want to get our cybersecurity message out there. It was quite disappointing to see Vicada as a startup out of Silicon Valley getting hit. But again, where do you see sort of cybersecurity coming into play and the importance of that?
I think this kind of threat, unfortunately, whether you're talking to private companies or government or even us individuals, it's, unfortunately, it's unavoidable. I think the best way is to really analyze the threat and do your due diligence. But at the same time, I feel there has to be more from the government and the regulations around to ensure that the SIs who actually have the access to the customer information do take more stringent measurement to protect their valuable information. We talked about data being a new oil. It's not just sensitive information, but can also have a great implication in financial. So I think we almost have to draw out a new page, say, where are the potential breaches and who is taking responsibility? Seagate has implemented some of the highest encryption drives for our enterprise drives, and we have planned to roll that out in a security area as well. And I think it will be very welcomed as it will have a highest AES 256 encryption drives.
Nice. Okay, well, look, I've got a couple of movers and shakers, but I'll keep that to the end. And let's dive into some video analytics. And a good example of some leading technology that I saw this week was out of Singapore and in the schools. So let's joined by Abhijit Shanbhag. I hope I'm saying that correctly, founder and CEO of Graymatics. Abhijit, how are you?
Oh, very good. Hello, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Very good. You are in Singapore, I take it? I got that right?
I'm currently based in Singapore.
Very good. So I've got some slides here. Maybe introduce us to cognitive multimedia analytics and what you're doing, because you had a play on this of smart CCTV. So you're obviously trying to sort of commercialize the video analytics side of things. This isn't so much a surveillance security approach. It's more of a sort of a business operations and data collection viewpoint. Yeah, talk us through your business.
Sure. It's actually a combination of both, improving or making operations more efficient, as well as for security and safety. So as a quick background, Graymatics, we have developed a video AI platform to be able to harvest very rich set of insights from the installed CCTV base. Okay,
Yep.
a large number of CCTVs currently installed across cities, inside schools, currently used in a very reactive way. So the video feeds will be captured by CCTVs, recorded within a digital video recorder. And if some crime, vandalism happens, then the security team will go and try and retrieve the appropriate feeds. So with respect to Graymatics, we are now enabling our platform to be able to utilize the massive installed base of CCTVs in a very proactive, solution-oriented way.
Okay.
So,
listen, just before you go on, I had my slide back the wrong way. So anyone listening, I've got a giveaway here. You can see it in the background here. So if you want to grab a copy of, this is a freebie from D-Link. If you can tell me how much these are retailing for in Australia, you can grab one if you like. So if you're listening, comment in on how much these are retailing for, and I'll get one out to you. So I had my slides the wrong way around, so we'll run that again at the end of this. But Abhijit, talk us through, you talked about your sort of platform and your video and audio. You're picking up audio as well. Let's talk about kind of what these applications are, and maybe let's even start off before the first question is, where do you have this sort of, who are your customer bases? What are your customer profiles? How many systems do you have out in the market sort of doing this?
Sure. So currently we have 4 categories of customers. So one includes the cities, smart cities. Okay, the cities which have installed their CCTVs across traffic junctions, inside parks, inside government buildings and such. They are utilizing our platform very actively so as to be able to better leverage from their installed CCTV base for various solutions.
Okay, and you sit on top of the VMS, or are you reviewing recorded footage, or are you reviewing at the edge at the camera level? Where does your system sit?
The system sits in a server or a device. Actually, it will be co-located with where the video management system is.
At the head end, right? Yep.
Exactly. So it can take the video feed either from the VMS or directly from the CCTV.
Okay.
Right.
So obviously you've got your video analytics, your person recognition and tracking, clothing, so dress, color, pattern, sleeve style, and neckline. What type of resolution do you need to start to pick up things like necklines and sleeve styles?
While the necklines and such do require a higher resolution, the whole premise of our platform is to be able to utilize the existing installed CCTV base, which may have very low resolution. Right, so we have optimized a lot of our analytics to be able to work with, say, the majority installed base, which may be about 1 megapixel resolution.
Okay.
Right. So we provide more than 100 analytics, and certain analytics like neckline might require a higher resolution camera, but most of our other analytics, the current installed base of 1 megapixel is sufficient to provide the level of analytics.
Okay. Now, the one that really got my interest was the applications in schools. Do you have a system in a school in Singapore?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
So in fact, some major universities in Singapore, and actually in other parts of the world, like in India, in Philippines, are now using the platform for a range of use cases. Again, they have several CCTVs that are already installed. It's not effectively used right now. They are now beginning to make much better use of the CCTVs to offload a lot of the operational burden. Like as an example, with respect to attendance management within classes, it is estimated that close to about 20% of the classroom time can be taken in doing attendance management and such activities. Right. So now the CCTVs are already installed inside the school, inside the classrooms and such. There's no need to do any explicit attendance management. Our platform can immediately detect every person in the classroom, and with our dashboard, the attendance log is managed. But in addition to that, there are various additional use cases as well, like when with respect to identifying what the attentivity of the student inside the classroom is. Right. So for teachers, for example, it's very important for them to have some kind of a metric as to what the attentivity of the classroom is. And classrooms are becoming bigger. You now have 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 students in a classroom. It's impossible to be able to track how, let's say, students in the back benches and such are doing. So with our platform, it will identify what the attentivity metric across the students within the classroom is, and it will provide immediate feedback to the teacher. So
okay, let's just stop and talk about this one, Jeff. What are your thoughts on this one? I am seeing issues. I can see applications for it though, because I can imagine if you got 30 little ones running around, it's going to be a hard one. Maybe when they walk in. What are your thoughts on this one at a school for attendance? Because obviously there's going to be a degree of facial recognition there too.
Yeah, so I mean, I got two little kids going in different schools, and these days, just because we talked about the cyber threat just earlier on, some parents do have concerns about their kids' face being shared on the social media network. So I guess different countries will definitely adapt to sort of different solutions. I can see that these tools will provide certain advantage. Obviously, we're talking about utilizing a lot of existing infrastructures, but I think there has to be some sort of a customization with respective schools or state governments. Yeah.
Yeah, Abhijit, I think the other one would be where that camera is placed and the type of camera. So I wouldn't see it as a standard security camera. You would need to have that right angle. You'd need to bring it down at the front of the class. And here in Australia, I'm not aware that they would allow this. But I can see things like expression and surprises. If you're not identifying the students, but you can sort of track attentiveness and a few other bits and pieces, that might be of interest to some schools, I can see. But yeah, I think there's always that privacy, security and safety versus the business case for it. Is there business case for something like this? So it's an interesting one, and yeah, it's something we'll monitor over time. If you have a good example of where it's been applied, yeah, please let us know and we'll share that out. And I think the other one would be how the information is presented. Is it on a line graph? It's a bit like with us with a YouTube video. We can see what our audience attention was as they watch a video, whether they all leave after 30 seconds. Most of them do, but and then if some sort of last through to the end, yeah, we obviously see that. And I think if you got that sort of feedback on a classroom, that would be an interesting one from a teacher performance monitoring application. So yeah, very good. And obviously there's some others. You're sort of identifying certain behavior and activity in the hallway as well.
That's correct. In fact, on the previous one, you asked about properly presenting the data, right? So a very important part of our platform is also the dashboards and such, which provides various actionable recommendations finally to the end user, in this case, with respect to the teachers, that perhaps the attentiveness in one part of the classroom is a lot lower than in another part. So all of that will be provided explicitly as recommendations.
Yeah, very interesting.
Right. So another
go.
Right. So another very important area is with respect to detecting any bullying activities, right, inside the school. And I might also just comment, privacy is not so much of an issue in some of these use cases. I can understand it can be a use case of, let's say, especially outside the classroom, inside, let's say if students are outside the school, and tracking students and identifying what they may be doing may be viewed to be potentially invading privacy. Here we have teachers who are looking at the students, who are watching everyone. We are just trying to make things a lot easier for the teachers by utilizing these cameras which are already installed in an easier way.
Yeah, we do have there's a similar startup here in Australia doing this, and obviously pushing and running is something that kids will be doing anyway. It's going to be a hard one to track, but obviously it just highlights this behavior. It doesn't necessarily alarm it. It just kind of highlights that it's occurring, right?
Right. So with respect to bullying, right, some of the major universities in Singapore are also now deploying this platform to detect any kind of bullying activities in different parts of the school campus, right? So there are certain areas which are termed to be vulnerable areas with respect to bullying activities and such. So specifically for the CCTVs which may be installed in there, they would utilize our platform to send an alert anytime.
And the other one is, this is an interesting one as well, with detecting whether people are in or out of school uniform, if you've got the shirts tucked in or not. That's a good one.
Yeah, especially wearing, it's interesting, wearing school ties. Some of the schools, for example, in India, they are very, very sticklers that the students coming in, they have to wear their tie. Commonly, there is some mindset, especially the younger kids, if they are, they've removed their tie and opened out their buttons, they may not be progressing in the direction they would like to in a disciplined way, right?
I think it could also, I mean, that could be one thing, is identifying potential suspicious persons or intruders. Anyone who's not in uniform is obviously a red flag as to what that person might be doing there, particularly at certain times or certain locations. And this is another one here where you've got preventing students loitering. So again, that's certain locations, and you're setting up these trigger lines here, yeah?
Exactly. The sensitive areas inside inside a school campus where students cannot enter, and in fact, some of those rules may be fairly complex. That students cannot enter a certain part, but there can be adults who can enter there, right? Or there will be certain other spaces within the campus that at specific times, no one, students or adults, nobody could enter, right? So there are various such complex rules where the triggers need to be sent based on the custom requirements.
Very good.
So
I like this
one application
that
comes to my mind is, so Chris, you probably don't do this anymore, but a lot of parents here pick up their kids after the school. Obviously, some catch the bus, but when the parents' car comes in, they need to flag their last name in front of the windshield. And a mission is given to a teacher to remember all these children's last name. And if you're talking about kids with thousands in school, it's a mission impossible.
Yeah.
Right. So you could have a number plate recognition where the kids get picked up, and they can have a system to call out the kid's name. So I think that's less invasive, very applicable to the Australian market.
I like it. Yeah, some sort of you could even have a sort of digital sign up saying for the kids to get ready and line up in a certain order, the same order as the cars are coming in. I also like this one. I literally did this in high school. The teacher was writing on the blackboard, and I snuck out and I took the afternoon off. I was a naughty 14-year-old. But when I saw this, I thought, oh, damn it, okay. So now they're going to catch me next time. And certain violence or activity in the classroom as well. Obviously, are you using machine learning or some sort of algorithm that is self-learning in this type of behavior? What type of tech are you actually using?
Yeah, well, yeah, all of these techniques are AI powered, all based on machine learning and such. Commonly, it may be a combination of machine learning, for instance, to detect a person, and then to track how the person is moving. If the person is moving in an anomalous way and such, again, there will be some machine learning techniques used to identify if a person's gait is anomalous. But otherwise, it's a combination of machine learning techniques with specific configurable rules that the school authorities may have. So again, we provide some kind of some very simple UI where they can enter certain rules, identify a region of interest, where, let's say, to detect any kind of loitering or crossing the line of, let's say, a classroom exit door at specific prohibited hours and such.
And you're the founder. Is this something that you've developed over time as the company in terms of your own algorithms, or just applying obviously known algorithms? But is there anything unique there that you've done, or you've just built this together?
No, all of this intellectual property belongs to Grammatics. So Grammatics has been developing this. In fact, we started before deep learning and AI really became such a vogue word. In fact, we were using various deep learning techniques. In fact, some of the pioneers of what later came to be called as deep learning were part of the founding team of Graymatics.
Great, very nice. And
So,
I will give I'll give the Isotana team a plug here. They've listed, I think they listed last year, but very similar. But it's a self-learning. It sounds like you're applying sort of traditional video analytics with some of that machine learning algorithm as well, so that video starts to learn. How long have you been around, Abhijit?
we started in Silicon Valley. We actually got incorporated towards the end of 2011. So it's been a while, but in full operations, we've been since 2013.
Okay, very good.
While we started in Silicon Valley, we started an office at an early time in Singapore, since APAC was our initial target market. And with time, we decided to move our HQ to Singapore from Silicon Valley.
Very good. Well, look, thank you so much for joining us. We'll let you go, but it's good to get a briefing. And as Jeff and I sort of discussed, and even now, Jeff, I'm pretty sure it was this year so far, we looked at the video analytics market, and the Seagate Skyhawks are specifically built. And maybe that's one thing. You don't look at the back end of the VMS. You're just purely a box that sits aside that and does the video analytics. You're not interested in the storage aspect. Are you storing data as well, Abhijit?
We do work closely with, and in fact, we would love to work with Jeff for Australia, but we do work closely with the system vendors.
Very good.
Including Seagate. So it's finally a joint solution which is deployed.
Well, look, it's let me just bring up your website if I've got it in front of me. It is graymatics.com. So if you want to reach out, yeah, that's the one. So if you want to reach out to Abhijit, let us know, or find him up on LinkedIn. He's there, so he'll be in the show notes. But Abhijit, we'll let you go. Enjoy your warm Singapore afternoon.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Jeff. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. See you later. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, Jeff, I'm just conscious of time now, but we'll finish off. It's an interesting one from a market update. We've put it out to the audience what their highlights will be. Just some other news from the market that we had, and this is part of our CCTV Buyers Guide, which is cctvbuyersguide.com. We've also split this year. Our CCTV Buyers Guide is now also split with our Smart Cities Tech, because we found that the surveillance video market really does often cross over to that Smart Cities Tech, and it's very converged. So we try to keep the industry, the VMS industry news separate. Quest Security here in Australia won the APAC Genetech Solution Innovation Partner of the Year. So well done to Quest Security. Onvi have got a new chairman. And let me just bring up his name, otherwise we won't know who it is. I should have had that one ready. Do you know it off by chance? Onvi, where it is? Here we go. Leonard Levitt is the new chairman of the Onvi Steering Committee. Because I think the previous chairman was there for quite a while. So Onvi have got a new chairman. And also, here he is, Michael Hirsch. Is also the head of now the 5 business unit at Bosch Building Technologies. It was another sort of mover and shaker. So that's pretty much it from our market update. If there's anything else, Jeff, let us know. And I think we'll try to keep these going quarter to quarter, just on what those trends are. What would be your outlook for quarter 2? Unfortunately, here in Australia, Queensland's just gone into a 3-day lockdown, looking a little bit troublesome for the rest of Australia. But we have enjoyed a couple of months free, and as you mentioned, the physical events just started to come back, and I think everyone's put back into reality now that this isn't going away. What do you reckon for quarter 2?
Well, I think hopefully the Queenslanders enjoy the extended Easter break, and hopefully they'll be able to roam free as a new sports season of the AFL and NRL kicks off. For the Q2, I'm really trying to understand better about this impact that we're going to be facing with the semiconductor shortage. Getting different insights from different suppliers and market researchers. But at the moment, it seems like it's going to stay here for a while. Going to impact many industries, not just our industry, but across automotive. And so our priority is really making sure we have enough stocks available for our partners here in Australia. And I think we've done that in the last few months. And so we'll continue to make sure we have a right access to our partners.
Yeah, hopefully the supply chain does sort of get back to normal. It should do, but we might have some additional delays with the Suez Canal shipment. God knows how much has been blocked through that ship, and it'll be interesting to see how much it does impact us in the region as well, particularly say with European supplies coming through to the region. So most of them will be coming through there. So yeah, something to monitor on the impacts, as you mentioned, semiconductors, but also sort of global shipping supply chains at the moment. It's been disrupted. So a good one to look out for. So look, Jeff Park, the ANZ Country Manager with Seagate, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Chris.
And look forward to having you on again, mate. Thank you very much. I'll let you go.
Bye-bye.
Good on you, all the best. Okay, very interesting. And I've still got not one chat. So either there's an issue with the system or someone's not watching or paying attention. If you want a new D-Link camera, just tell me how much these are retailing in Australia, and I'll get that one off to you. The first one to answer that will get a free home surveillance kit. Now, without further ado, there's a lot of news coming out on this sector. This is our Space and Defence channel, and I'm going to be bringing on Dr Chris Flaherty of the MySpace Warfare Analysis Lab. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Hello, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Chris versus Chris. Great to see you. Now, we have had you on, and the last time we spoke was we're talking about war lasers. Now, for those in the audience who don't know Dr. Chris Flaherty, Chris writes a number of articles, very forward-looking, sort of almost extreme in their own right, but it does start to give you a sense of where space is heading. And what we're going to do, Chris, we've looked at the first 3 months of 2021 in the space sector, and I've got your notes in front of me, and let's just rattle them through. I take it you've got your notes as well?
That's correct. Just on the war lasers, it's actually quite interesting. Perseverance rover actually has a laser.
Nice.
And it's applied it for the first time on Mars.
Yeah, well, it was interesting, after that discussion, I started to see lots of news and other announcements about lasers as well. So again, from the audience, just turn yourself on to laser technology when you read it and see it, and you'll start to see there's a lot happening in lasers. We covered a little bit on it on the fiber optics as well, on optic networks. Obviously, they use lasers as well. So it's very much leading technology. Let's start off. I suppose the main one was obviously we've landed on Mars.
That's correct, yeah.
So yeah, talk us through, and the NASA helicopter is about to take off.
The helicopter is about to be deployed on Mars. Now, it's a small helicopter. It's about the size of a standard drone. It's currently hooked on the underbelly of the Perseverance rover, and the first NASA tweeted the first photograph showing the process of basically releasing the helicopter, of setting it up on the ground. So that's a 6-day process. It's not a long. Everything has to be tested and pre-tested. In actual fact, there's a copy, an exact duplicate of Perseverance, what's in a place called the Mars Yard, where everything they plan to do with the rover on Mars is first done by its duplicate here on Earth.
Wow.
So it's a long process, and as they have said, once they start, they cannot stop.
And I suppose they execute that program, and I suppose the other one is the 20-minute delay on whatever command they give. They don't know if it's working for 20 minutes.
That's correct. And even when we were actually watching the actual landing of Perseverance on the day it happened,
yeah,
we were actually watching it 7 minutes after it had actually happened. So hence the expression, the 7 minutes of hell. So,
I feel like that when we go live on here, I've got to wait 20 seconds just to know I got the feed going through. 20 seconds is a long time.
The only other little interesting piece is they actually took a piece of the original Wright brothers airplane, the Kitty Hawk.
Yeah, right.
A little piece of the canvas just underneath the solar panel for the integrity.
Incredible.
Because this will be the first time humans would have flown on another planet.
Yeah, and almost like that remote flight as well. Maybe because it's actually going to fly on April the 8th. It's scheduled for, right?
That's the current anticipated date. That's correct. Yes.
Okay, so slightly outside the quarter. What else have you got here? SpaceX, the SN11 launch was yesterday, was it?
Well, it was actually supposed to happen earlier in Australian time. The launch was scrubbed yet again.
Damn it.
There's a lot riding on this launch. One is what has surfaced is issues with the relationship with the FAA. A lot of that you can pretty well take it as, there's a lot of argy-bargy going on out on the internet world. What they're trying to do is embed an FAA official with SpaceX, because this is the process. They're moving at speed in terms of testing and launching these vehicles. They have had some crashes in the past. That's expected. That's part of the SpaceX process. They've also had weather problems. As you know, Texas had severe weather problems for the first, a month ago. They had severely bad weather last week in terms of launching the craft. There was fog as well. So they're looking tomorrow, the 30th US date.
Yeah.
And they should attempt the launch again. What's significant about SN11 is it's the last of the current campaign, where they're testing a particular move, the ability of the craft to be launched, reach 10 kilometers, reverse, flip, go into its famous belly flight, flip again, and then land. And what they're testing at the moment is that actual process. And they've only got 3 engines on it, which are the gimbaled central engines, which allow the craft to be maneuvered.
Yeah.
So that's what they're testing, as well as the issue about the actual landing legs. Once they successfully complete that maneuver, they then go to a new series called the SN15 to 20. These are expected to be much more upgraded craft. There's a long way to go. And as Elon Musk has often said, building the rocket's easy. It's the system to build the rocket, which is actually hard. And that I think a lot of people don't quite understand when they look at Space Base. Well, Space Base is called. I think it's called Space Base. They don't realize it looks like a light industrial area, and it looks like there's a lot of fabricating going on of craft. But they're not realizing that what they're doing is they're actually figuring out what's the entire industrial process to build a spacecraft, get it onto a pad, test it, and then be able to launch it. And it's going to be, and basically return it, recondition it, and send it back up again.
Yeah, and that's the commercial process that Elon Musk follows, right? A bit like the Tesla program.
And there's a lot to go into turning what we see now into an actual spacecraft that could carry potentially up to 100 people.
Well, look, best of luck to them, because they've got it landing. They've just got to not blow up afterwards. So that's one to watch, and hopefully within the next 24 hours. So that's a good one.
I would also suggest don't be disappointed if it gets scrubbed again, because as I said, there's a lot riding on this mission.
Yeah.
And I think the way I think they will get there. I mean, that's inevitable, because there's a lot to go riding on this. And we're talking about a craft that's in the order of 120 tons plus.
Mm.
Even a soft landing, I think it was calculated as hitting the ground at something like 20 miles per hour.
All right.
We're dealing with an awful lot of stresses and strains on this craft. But, this is something which potentially could actually change dramatically how humans enter into and operate in space if the craft of certain proportions can be built. And
the images coming out with those it does take us back to the video market as well, and the high resolution video of this and of these tests is amazing. It looks cinematographic in a way. It really is an amazing feat, just from the angles and the views that they're able to capture.
Well, the interesting thing is that out there's a huge body of enthusiasts who are actually, they're parked out on the greens, so to speak, outside SpaceX's front fence, and they've been documenting this. So, I mean, one of the difficulties that SpaceX is probably facing at the moment is that the enthusiasm and the hype is potentially you have a crowd of people out there literally loving the thing to death. And that's, in one respect, that's good, because that gets people enthusiastic and interested in this technology. But it can also be detrimental, especially when people don't understand, well, it just blew up. Well, in actual fact, it was probably expected to blow up anyway. What they want to be in the situation is when it finally lands, it doesn't blow up. They know exactly what to build next, and then they can push on ahead. They ultimately anticipate to move to a weekend launching testing, but every coming Saturday, Sunday.
Nice.
So we are looking at a lot of activity ultimately. To what will be the next big thing, of course, is the test of their booster, the super heavy lift booster, which is going to be one of the largest craft ever built. Now one of those will roll out fairly shortly after this test, and that will be tested on the ground in terms of pressure testing the craft. But they do there is an expectation that there should be a full test launch by about June, July of both the booster with the Starship on top of it. And we're talking about one of the largest spaceships ever built.
Okay, it's looking good for 2021. That's why we're covering space a lot more now, just on how exciting it is. Now, just conscious of time, Chris, let's run through the Rolls-Royce innovative contract with the UK Space Agency.
Yeah, this is actually probably one of the more interesting ones because Rolls-Royce is a pretty impressive company when it comes to nuclear technology. And the best expert opinion or the best view is that ultimately, if we want to go to Mars, we need to shorten the distance dramatically. Nuclear propulsion rocket engines will do that. What interestingly enough, even Musk himself actually in 2019 made a comment that he actually ultimately saw Starship being fitted out with nuclear propulsion with these sorts of engines. We could, in fact, actually see an entire generation of tugs, effectively, who basically push craft into orbit and ultimately onto their flight path into another planet, disengage, and then allow the craft ultimately to land or go through its process for landing. So essentially, that technology is going to be a fairly significant player. And again, it shows that we are beginning to go from the rubber hitting the road in terms of we're not just testing technology or say it's going to happen in 10 years' time. We're now looking at actual technology which will start hitting the marketplace. And I think this is one to watch.
Definitely. And that, just briefly on the stats on that, that's potentially making that trip to Mars 20 to 25% shorter.
That's correct.
With that. The next one is the Axiom Space revealed first ever private astronaut crew for the ISS.
Yep, this is Axiom Space is actually fairly well positioned within the market in terms of its financial backing and also in terms of its expertise to start building effectively a brand new space station on the back of the existing ISS. So what we're going to start seeing in the next couple of years are progressive missions where Axiom are sending missions to the space station to get crews familiarized with the space station, also start the planning process. So what we will then see is ultimately by 2024, the first module being constructed, launched to the space, attached to the space station with its own robotic arm, and then successive modules after that. It's expected at a certain point that the Axiom Space Station will release itself from the ISS, and will start a whole new career as another space station. We're not sure as to what the ultimate fate of the ISS at the moment is. It does actually have a use-by date of another 5 years.
Yeah.
However, it's been in space already, I think we're looking at a 20, 30-year program. So potentially we don't know how much longer the ISS will be there, but we're now looking at the first generation of replacement space stations. And later, and very shortly, we'll also talk about the Chinese will begin their major missions surge to start launching their space station.
Well, speaking of that, is the next one. You got the Russian, Roscosmos, the Russian Federation State Corporation for Space Activities, has issued a statement. It and China were going to sign an agreement for an international lunar research station.
Yep. I think a lot of people didn't really take this one terribly seriously, which is unfortunate because this is not something that's just come out of nowhere. It sits the back of the Chinese development. The Chinese have been looking for have had a vision statement out there, looking for international partners as well as their vision to ultimately place a lunar research base on the moon. The Russians have been really one of the natural partners for the Chinese, in that the Russians, like the United States, they both have extensive experience in building pressure modules. And really, when we're starting to look at space stations and lunar bases, we're actually almost looking pretty well at the same technology. And literally, as one is floating in space, one is being placed in position on the surface of the moon. And I think that the other interesting thing about this is, as we'll cover off when we look at the Chinese approach, they've always stated we're looking at proven technologies and we're taking the pragmatic approach. And I think this has been one of the biggest problems probably with the space up to now, is it's always done in prospective sense. In 10 years' time, we will do this, or we will develop technologies to do this.
Yeah.
Yet we actually had this technology with us for over 20 or 30 years now. And
this comes, sorry to interrupt. This comes on the back of China, the intensive launch campaign.
That's correct.
With 11 launches to complete the construction of their large modular space station by around 2023.
And yes, and I was looking at the latest Chinese reporting, and they are indicating that probably about spring China time, which is about May, they should begin actually the first module launch. So we should actually start seeing construction take place this year. Now, this will be really interesting, because I think people will get for the first time to see a practical example of what's actually needed to get a space station into space. The Chinese have already largely built the station on the ground, ready to be assembled. So effectively what you're doing is you're building the craft on the ground. Remember, space stations are actually spacecraft.
Yep.
They've been built on the ground, they're laid out, then they're shipped to the rockets, then they're put into space. Crews are already training in China on a mock-up of the station currently to prepare themselves ready for the process of doing this. But this again is going to be a classic example of how these things are actually built, because once these surge starts, they have to keep going. So again, we're looking at a fair amount of activity this year as they start putting one up after another, getting crews up there to start building this thing and putting it together. So this is actually going to be a really exciting time, I think, from people to getting to see practical examples of how humans go about doing this in space.
And what impact do you think that will have on the current ISS? Do you think China will exclude or then start to bring their own partners into their space station, and then we end up with a sort of a US led space station and a China led space station, as we do see with this technology divide between the two? I
tend to be a little more hopeful. I have a feeling that given the issues, because a lot of there is actually a bit of an overlap between China's international partners and the actual current international partners on the International Space Station. And yeah, there has been an historic issue where the US had largely banned actually from engaging with China in terms of space technology. I have a feeling that we may in fact be going towards a posture where these things start to merge in terms of similarity of programs, similarity of people involved, and similarity of the technology. I think that the realities is given that space is starting to become a very crowded space, especially in low orbit, I can't see how you can't do this with some sort of coordination. To give you an example as well, even though the moon is a largish place, I can't see how you won't end up with a situation where a large number of people are starting to set up lunar base operations without there being coordination. And the other basic issue is, think about space, and the analogy of space has been Antarctica or the Arctic. We all have bases out there. There is a certain amount of coordination and mutual support. It's inevitable given what a harsh environment we're actually talking about. So I think one of the pragmatic issues, or the practical issues, might well be that we actually do start to see a lot more coordination in the future. That's inevitable. I mean, even if there's an actual mishap in space, someone's got to come to someone's help.
I take it the sort of almost the law of the sea counts, and that's hopefully they sort of do abide by that. As you say, it's an exploration effort as well.
It's everyone involving, because international space law is starting to resemble international maritime law, largely because we are starting to see so much human activity in space. Up to now, it was really superpower rivalry. We're now seeing it's called complexity inversion. The complex activities were carried out by governments, and only a handful of governments at a certain point in time. There's an inversion where governments become, and we'll actually cover this off at the very last topic, where governments are simply paying for a service. But private enterprise actually has now got the bulk of the space assets. Axiom is an example of that. at a certain point, NASA is actually paying for a service on a commercially run space station. So there's been a complexity inversion to private enterprise. And that's an inevitable progression in space. That's exactly what we're seeing with Elon Musk and SpaceX, complexity inversion. At one point, NASA was the sole stakeholder and holder of the big pieces of collective machinery, if you like, for going into space and being in space. That's now been flipped over, and you've now got private enterprise companies holding onto that.
And NASA itself, we just released an article on that, why NASA is being commercialized for that very reason. Now, let's finish off with some news from closer to home. And I did mention the South Australian announcement from Southern Launch, and you've got this in your notes as well. This it's quite a big news. We're going to start launching into space from Australia.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that there's a couple of companies we need to keep in mind. Southern Launch is one, because they're actually they're actually mostly looking at the infrastructure side in terms of building a series of potentially, there's 3 places for bases in Australia. There's one in South Australia, which is better for the polar orbit, the central South Australia, Northern Territory, and there's probably up towards the far north of Australia, which is better for going towards equatorial launches. But the two major company players, there's a number of company players in this area, but we've got Southern Launch, but we've also got Gilmore. I'm sorry, I just pronounced
Gilmore Space, yeah.
Space, who are actually in the process of actually testing and building a rocket themselves, a rocket body. So this again, actually, I think the interesting thing is that Australia, what I like about this story is it shows that you can be either in the end of one end of space exploration, where you're talking about testing and developing new technologies, or you're at the end of the market, we're talking about building space infrastructure. And this is very much about us building space infrastructure. There is a defense component to this. And this is where we're starting to look at the very small rockets which are able to get into low Earth orbit, a small satellite device into low Earth orbit. And essentially that, I think, is interesting. And I think it also it starts to push the Australian space industry in the right direction in terms of actually having actual assets. For instance, the other day there was a fairly significant announcement where UNSW in Canberra space had launched a CubeSat again, but they were using a Rocket Lab mission, which of course we have Rocket Lab in New Zealand. So what we need to start seeing in Australia is probably a move towards both a fixed base as well as mobile bases. Southern Launch, interestingly enough, have actually been looking at mobile launches, because they're actually firing a much smaller type of rocket to go into low Earth orbit or to near Earth orbit. So that, I think, is actually pretty interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how they fare and how much government support they ultimately get.
Well, they do. It's also on Indigenous involvement as well.
Yep.
So, there's a lot of sort of STEM benefits out of that as well. So we look forward to, we'll be speaking to Lloyd Dant, the CEO of Southern Launch, on April the 6th. Yep. And we have had Gilmore. So for anyone listening, we have a space and defence playlist on our YouTube. So all of our previous interviews, we've had Gilmore Space on before as well. And the like. And then let's finish off with the last one. The CSIRO has now got a new agreement with Intuitive Machines for moon landings.
Yep, and I think this reminds me, have we all seen The Dish?
Of course. I watch it every time it's on TV on Sunday night.
And it takes us back to the absolute heyday of the golden era of the space age with the Apollo landings. And again, involves that wonderful piece of historical installation, the Parkes Radio Telescope. This is actually an interesting one because the story is more complicated than what we have in the actual release. What's happening is again this process of NASA commercialization and passing off the hardware and the stuff to actually do the launches to private enterprise in the US. And Intuitive Machines are about to start a program of putting launches on the moon, which are going to get progressively bigger and more complex. The role of the Parkes Telescope and the CSIRO is part of the entire tracking network, which has to be set up. The interesting point about the commercial agreements, that in terms of the US bids, is something like 50% of the actual respondents' bid has to be done domestically in the US. In the case of Intuitive Machines, I think they've actually got probably most of their supply chain is actually in the US, but they also have a fairly substantial international component. And again, it goes back to, we're sort of looking almost at the sort of in the 21st, we're looking at the sort of process of actually getting a lander like the Apollo mission back onto the moon. And so this is actually a fairly large setup, but it's again an example of where the private company has to get all its ducks in a row in order to progress with the NASA contract. They will ultimately be taking, I think the first mission will take about half of it will be NASA payload, the other half will be commercial. And I think their third mission, which is for 2023, actually at this point in time will be fully commercial. So now by 2023, we should be starting to see a fair amount of significant activity on the moon. And I suspect as well as that even though countries are saying that we will have something built by 2025 or be by 2030, I suspect that once the surge begins in terms of space, the space industry, and the funding starts to be seen and the benefits start to be seen, we're probably going to see a lot of those dates brought forward substantially.
Well, certainly when they start taking off and it's there's no more crashes and the testing's over, and they have technology that works, right? And
as a country like China you start seeing major launches, and they are building something, and you can actually get a telescope and actually watch it from Earth. I think people are going to start seeing space turns from being something that's a bit jokey and a bit Star Trek-y and a bit science fiction-y to being something which is actually real, and we are actually dependent on space. For example, I think I watched an excellent presentation by the head of Gilmore, where actually talked about the fact is that we're ultimately going to become extremely dependent in the Australian interior upon our space-based infrastructure for broadbanding network. And I think the earlier presentation you actually had was the two gentlemen talking about surveillance technology and other sort of tech like that. In the Australian, wide area, in the Australian outback, in terms of our area schools, which are actually largely, on the individual farmsteads and things like that, that's the sort of technology we're going to be reliant on.
Yep. Well, it will be. It is a game-changing area. Now, I'm conscious of time, and we've gone over the full hour, so we will try to keep the audience wanting more. And as I mentioned, we'll be back with Southern Launch on April 6th. We'll continue to monitor it. Chris Flaherty, if you go to our spaceanddefence.io channel, you can see all of Chris's articles on there. And otherwise, you can join his LinkedIn group, the MySpace Warfare Analysis Lab. And again, he's obviously monitoring this as an analyst. And also a contributor author as well. So look, Dr. Chris Flaherty, thank you so much for your time. A pleasure catching up again. Keep those articles coming. And what was the title of your last one? Just released today? Or?
I think I dropped a new one onto you today.
I did. I saw that. It's off. It'll probably be on the website already. So please check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes for this latest article as well. But thanks, Chris. Very detailed, and appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's great. It's a great opportunity to have a talk. Thanks so much.
Have a good day. Cheers, mate. Bye-bye. Okay, very good. And almost too much going on. It's a little bit scary, but very, very exciting. Now, just to finish off, a report of the day, as I always do, and this is from CEDA, and that is the Committee for Economic Development of Australia. And this is a good match, optimising Australia's permanent skilled migration. Somewhat troubling. Research highlights that nearly a quarter, about 23% of permanent skilled migrants in Australia are working in a job beneath their skill level. And then more than 32% of state-sponsored migrants were working at lower skills, and the employer-sponsored migrants experienced the best outcomes. Only 13% were working at a lower skills level than their nominated field. But it has cost the country over that 5-year period an estimated $1.25 billion of wages foregone for that permanent skilled migrants who have experienced a skills mismatch. So this one's on the MySecurity marketplace, along with a range of other industry reports. So please check this out as well. The Cyber Risk Leaders magazine. You can grab a copy of that on the marketplace, as well as check out some of the merchandise. And it's not just the Cyber War series, it's also a range of cyber security and security-related merchandise. As we mentioned a couple of times now, Lloyd Damp will join us on April the 6th, talking about the Southern Launch approval for their space launches out of the Kuniba test range. And then we're going to be joined by Amir Beery, who's the founder and CEO of Camiro Tech, based in Israel, as the first one of our Israeli tech series. So looking forward to that one. That one is a portable ISR through-wall imaging system. Always very interesting. Now, I don't know what has happened to our chat. Thank you to Squadron Leader Sebastian. He's one of our most regular followers. So thank you so much for your comment there. But if you want to get a copy of the secure board, check out, please. There's 3 still to give away. I can't believe no one's grabbed them just yet. And then also, if you want a D-Link camera and you're here in Australia, let us know how much these are retailing for, and I will send you out our free edition, our free copy of your D-Link home surveillance camera. So thank you so much. Appreciate your time listening to us today. We've gone over time, and that's it from us. Have a happy Easter, and we'll be back